This is Mikey Mason, and you're listening to Why We Game.
I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. My guest today has the distinction of being the first monarch to be on the show. So here we are 13 episodes in, and we actually have monarchy. Adam Freund is the king of the Riverlands Kingdom, Fiefdom, Shire?
Tal Dagore, Kingdom of Tal Dagore.
Tal Dagore. Okay, so that is the kingdom I was reading about on the Wikipedias. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Adam, how are you?
Good.
You're doing all right? You've had a rough few months of it, from what I understand, with the Amtgard.
Yeah, everything's with everything being shut down, it's not as much of a game right now as it is just kind of a social circle.
For people that don't know, and I don't know much, what is Amtgard?
Amtgard's considered a live-action role-play, though most of us at this point that play it really don't describe it that way. We more often call it what most people refer to as boffer fighting. Live-action role-play implies that there's a lot more acting, getting into character. Our game is more of a sport that has crossed over with a fantasy nerd-style game where it takes more athletic ability, a lot more sportsman activity, honestly, where it's not nearly as much as what you might see in like some of the movies like Role Models and that. There are LARPs like that, and they can be a lot of fun, but that's not really what Amtgard is.
So Amtgard is more combat cosplay.
Yeah, that sounds a little more accurate. So there's a lot of people that are out there that do a fighting where they fight with I think they call it Rotan or something. It's not metal, but they'll hit each other with rather harm weapons. We take it a step down and we actually use foam implements to fight each other. It's about as close to simulating combat as you can get without real threat to injury. And we'll wear armor and that sort of thing. We have objective-based games. There are magic and spells, but there's games that don't use them. It's more almost like a field activity than anything.
All right. Well, let me get all of the all the stuff out of the way before we get into the meat and potatoes, so we can get to understand Adam a little more as a gamer. Now, Adam, one of the things I like to do on the show is I have a theory about gaming and about how generations of gamers have changed and how the hobby is sort of being drug into a new world by new generations of gamers. But how old are you?
31.
You're so far the youngest guest and the only one who has achieved royalty. So was there a coup? Did you kill your brother to assume the throne?
No, how the monarchy works in our game is it's an elected position. The monarch is the equivalent of the program director. They are the person that leads activities, plans and runs events, handles disputes. They're the leader of the game, so to speak. But it is an elected position that we re-elect every 6 months.
So it sounds like the only thing you got from traditional monarchy is a heavy head that bears the crown.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't get to execute people and poison them at dinners and that sort of thing.
There are things like that people do, goofy, daring events and that. So, yeah, sometimes we get to do that, but no, most of the time it's a lot of work to be the monarch.
All right, so 31, you're born what year?
1988.
So in 88, fuck man, Jesus Christ, I'm old. But, so if you're born in 88, right, so you're not coming into gaming until what, the late 90s, early 2000s?
The first experience I can remember in my head was playing 3rd edition D&D around, it had to be early 90s with a couple buddies of mine in the basement. And to say that we were playing by the rules is really stretching it. We were looking at pretty pictures, writing down some numbers and pretending like we knew what we were doing.
But you were a little kid then at that point, right?
Oh yeah, we were 8, 9, I'd say.
Say 3rd edition, I want to say it came out in 2000, so was it earlier than that, Jason? Jason, what year was it? Was it that long? Wow. All right. Well, I've got the internet in front of me here.
We would have been right around when it came out.
Yeah, 10, 11 years old. Yeah.
We hung out at, I believe it was the fantasy shop that was in the strip mall, on Elm or like.
Oh God, back when it was in Hazelwood before they went down to, wow.
Yeah, it was a while. I'm pretty sure that's where we picked up the first books.
So then you and your buddies are playing D&D. What was your childhood experience like? Because as somebody in their mid 40s, it was pretty wild being a gamer at that time. When you're in middle school and a teenager, is there a stigma to engaging in the hobby?
To be honest, I never really cared. So,
well, but my question is, was it there?
I never got that, but I'm one of those people that can kind of, I don't know, I've always had very good social skills, so because of my ability to just kind of talk to people about what they were interested in, I never felt the stigma. Did I see some of the people that I'd play games with absolutely treated differently in high school and junior high? Yeah, they were the nerds, but they were treated like nerds through years, always have been, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that group of guys, I guess you could say there was a little bit of one. I never really felt it.
That's actually a promising sign, and it would be the first bit of evidence to me that you are a Generation 3 gamer and not a Generation 2 gamer, because you went through some sort of difficulty and adversity for being a nerd, but not specifically because you were worshiping Satan and murdering your friends in the steam tunnels, you know, underneath the condo complex, right? That's not what you were, that's what my generation was doing.
No, actually, I was gonna show you a picture of it, which is why I grabbed this. I actually was featured in my yearbook in high school for being a game master.
Get the fuck, okay, here we are. West's Game Master, Dungeons and Dragons, Adam Freund. Now, you're a very lovely young one in this picture.
Oh yeah, I know. I did not have a style thing going for me at all.
Are you fucking kidding? You're perfect. You have that nonchalant, no fucks to give haircut. You're a very handsome kid, man. Were you drowning in pussy?
No. I actually had a pretty steady girlfriend at that time.
Yeah, me too. Like, well, that makes you Generation 3 as well, is because you weren't, you weren't out there playing the field. You had a steady girlfriend, but you were a gamer that wasn't picked on all that much. Really, this whole show is about me understanding the gaming hobby. Your high school puts you in the yearbook as West's Game Master, not a Game Master, like you're the official representative of your high school in the high school's yearbook with this beautiful color picture of you with beautiful skin, great hair. I first got into Dungeons and Dragons when I was 8 years old, and I've been doing it for years now.
So look, I guess the same age between, cause I really don't remember. I know my first experiences, I remember the people I was with, Kevin Brode, Anthony Wilroth, and Tucker Carroll were the first 3 people I ever played with. I even remember the first encounter we ever had was with a monkey that Kevin spent hours describing, that he kept saying it wasn't a monkey, but the dude was just like, it was frustrating. But it's funny to think back on those things. I don't know why they called me West Games Master. We never did like a club at West. We tried one, but we didn't have a lot of interest out of the group that I had already started with, so we figured why bother continuing.
Well, because Game Master is this sort of mysterious and ominous title to the uninitiated, and so they didn't know what you were. I mean, people just grabbed that bold headline thinking that you were doing some sort of video game design, I suspect.
No. During the interview, they understood that it was Dungeons and Dragons. They understood I liked story writing. I was also in creative writing a lot. I like to write, so.
Oh no, I was just saying, hey, I grabbed a big bold headline to snag the reader.
Oh.
Not the interviewer, but the casual person going across who knew what they thought, right? But anyway.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm guessing that was a grabber.
Did you play anything as a kid besides Dungeons and Dragons, or did you gravitate into other games?
I tried, due to some cousins, Mage. I played Old World of Darkness Mage a few times. I've played Shadowrun. Even in high school, I tried those things. I was part of the Living Greyhawk campaign. That's actually where I got really hardcore into Dungeons and Dragons. Cause the guys I'd play with, I mean, you played in a campaign across all the states where if you wanted to play in a module that took place in the city of Divers, which was Missouri, you had to physically go to Divers, find a dungeon master in St. Louis that would run you through our modules for our area. That's how that worked. You'd get a little sheet that told you went there, that we'd sign with our little official RPGA number from Wizards of the Coast. I mean, honestly, it was the coolest thing. I wish it wouldn't have fallen apart. I'm pretty sure that happened because of the buyout when Hasbro took over Wizards. That kind of ended that. But
well, yeah, and of course, what they wanted to do is do their own thing and do D&D Adventures League. They wanted to rope you into that, and then of course get you addicted to online purchasing. And basically, WotC is the devil.
Yeah, I'd agree. They took something. There has never been anything that has ever been like Greyhawk, and I doubt there ever will be. It was a very fan-driven thing, which is what made it so great.
Unless you build it, right? Unless you if you only had experience, say, lording over a large community of gamers and I don't know, if someone had the skill set to do that, it could become a reality.
And if I were to ever do it, I know the exact team I'd put together for it, but that has not been on my plate. I've got other dreams that we can talk about when we get to the LARP stuff, because I mean, a lot of us have a lot of ambition on things we'd like to see happen in our games.
Let's get into the LARP, because you don't do gaming professionally, right? Which is usually the hook of my show, is that I want to get people in that are pro gamers in terms of this is what they do to make a living. But you run an organization or the company that you work with, right?
Yeah.
Is a non-profit organization that organizes these sorts of events, right?
Mm-hmm. So the business arm of our game, which goes by Riverland Games, I think they're an LLC, is a board of directors that really just handles the mundane things that we really don't want our players to have to deal with. So like covering insurance for the events to make sure nobody gets hurt, handling any kind of legal matters that come up. We have to have, money for financials for stuff for the legal.
Yeah, like you're like Robert Baratheon, and they're the small council, and they're basically doing all the bureaucratic malarkey that you want to be drunk and whoring and getting gored by boars.
Well, my interest is mostly writing events. I have a thing about I like to write adventures. I like to write. I like to design games too. So like a lot of what I do is I take field games that a lot of us played as kids. The games with the beanbags where you hit each other, the bouncing balls. I take a lot of that and I convert it into these LARP games where these people are playing with these bats and they don't even realize. Like I turned Red Rover into a game and half of them didn't realize what I did for a long time. I enjoy doing that. Watch these people have fun on this field. We have giant fights. Our bigger events can host 1,000 people we've built actual castle walls that people have to breach to get to objectives.
I'm going to be completely forthright. I am and it's not right. I'm very, very guilty of it. But every classification of people, every group of people, every subgroup of people has its hierarchies. And in the gaming hobby, at least from my experience growing up, people who played LARPs, live action role playing, were at essentially the bottom rung of the social structure of that ladder, right? Now, there was always bickering about who was on top of the hill, but we all agreed that LARPers were at the bottom, right? And the only LARP exposure I have are to World of Darkness style LARPs at conventions, or watching documentary films about people doing LARPing. And those, one, generally aren't great documentaries, and two, it's almost as if the filmmaker went out and deliberately found the most awkward, just uncomfortable people to put into those films. And oftentimes, not every case, but oftentimes, I feel like it's not a good representation of what it is that you and your ilk are doing.
No, honestly, if you saw our group and we weren't wearing our outfits, you would not have a clue about what sort of social circle we are. A lot of people think we're a family or something when we show up at places and we're not doing our thing. We're just kind of meeting it's a community as much as it is a game. A lot of us hang out outside of it. A lot of us become good friends. My relationship that I'm in right now spawned from the game. I met her in the game and me and her are now together. So it's more than just a game. It's a community too. In terms of the hierarchy thing, I don't know that I feel the same way now. That might have been true too. And I also could see that LARP would have started with some of those awkward, nerdy people you're talking about. And we absolutely have our share of those folks too. We welcome them as best you can. You understand that people generally that are interested in these things can be a little weird.
Sure. Well, and the most important factor that they have is that they care about the hobby.
Absolutely.
And that's the first key to the door of the tribe, is that you give a shit about this.
I don't know too many other people that'll drive across multiple states to go to an event for their hobby. The amount of travel that people do for our Amtgard events is insane. It blew my mind the first time someone acted like a 4-hour drive was an average weekend normal. And now I can drive 5 hours and not even blink an eye about it, because it was like, oh yeah, no, I needed to go down to Texas real quick because we had to meet up with this group and we had lunch. It was great. And people were just like, wait, you went to Texas yesterday? Yeah, I drove home too. It was wonderful.
That to me sounds like a fresh slice of hell.
The first few times you do it, maybe, but like after a while you just get kind of used to the travel and you get used to the people that you travel with, and that's another way that you wind up building friendship. I'm off to go camp in this event where we're gonna be in the woods and getting dirty for a while, and we're gonna go fight in these different scenes. Usually, you shower as you can, but you're still going to be stinky through most of the week because you're always fighting. And you go with these guys, or whole groups of people, we bond together, and then you go home and all you want to do is go back and do it again.
I'm going to treat Amtgard like it's a role-playing game book that I picked up in the game store. I picked it up. It looked interesting. I bought it home. I sat on the shitter. I cracked the spine. The first thing I do as a gamer, because I'm a fucking dork and probably a shitty gamer, I go right to combat, right? So
okay.
you're going to be my rule book. I'm going to ask you questions. How does combat work? At a cursory glance of this rule book, combat seems to me to be quick, precise, light impact.
Yeah, that's a very accurate way to describe it.
But then you guys also have not a pointing system, but a limb loss system. How does that work?
In Amtgard, there's sections that you can get hit in, and your limbs, your legs and your arms are all separate. If you take 2 limb shots, any 2 limbs, you wind up dying. When you lose a limb, there's different rules, of course. If you get hit in one of your arms, you can't use weapons in that arm any longer. If you get hit in one of the legs, you're supposed to go down to your knees unless you have bad knees. We, of course, have rules for people so they can stay standing.
Right, because I read there's a thing called posting. Yeah.
And that's because, of course, when you play a hobby, I'm 31, it's already not getting easy to fight. I'm fighting 16-year-olds. These guys can get on the ground and run all over the place and it does nothing. I get down on the ground and it takes me 5 minutes to get up. But no, the game's combat system, when you say fast, it very much is fast. Your first few times in the field, it's one of the reasons it's kind of hard to retain new players is they come out expecting what you interpret as a LARP. They come out expecting, I'm going to come out and I'm going to be Zanthul, the killer wizard who has a fireball and a dagger, and I'm going to just go own these nerds. And then you realize that the guy you're fighting, he's a competitive fighter from our squad. He doesn't really role play. That kid's here to fight, and he's been fighting for 6 years with this sword and shield and foam, and he can move where you can't track him. He can do things and make you do things with your weapons that you're not understanding how he's making you do things. I think that's when I really started respecting our combat. These guys will go to other games to compete just to see, and we pretty much always win.
Is there a ranking system for fighters in Amtgard?
So I'm not qualified to give you the ranking system because I am not a fighter of Amtgard. I am an administrator. I like to run the game. Now we absolutely have our fighters that look at it. It's their sport. This is their competition. And I mean, these guys get high strung on it to a point where they're arguing with each other. There's fights. I swear if we were bigger, there would be bets and it would be full blown because it's a very interesting sport to watch.
Well, that's a good transition from my next question. How in the world do you adjudicate the rules? I mean, you literally, Wikipedia has lingo for people who cheat.
Correct.
Right. I mean, you've got
Sluffers,
and there was another one, and then there's hate sticks and all sorts of weird lingo out there, which is amazing. It's developed its own culture, right? Its own tradition, which is absolutely fantastic. But how in the hell do you adjudicate the rules on contact? Just simply, I hit you, no you didn't, I feel like I'm 6 years old again, I shot you, no, I shot you.
We actually have reeves. We have officials, they're called reeves, they are referees. Their calls are law. If a reeve makes a call on you, that is the call.
Now as a middle-aged Caucasian who's very doughy and is pretty impotent in the rest of the world, that's where I want to execute and abuse my power.
Oh, well, it's not easy to do that. So a lot of the time with reeving, you're never reeving alone. You're usually at least in a pair with most fights, especially when we start getting into the higher level tournaments. And usually the people you ask to be your officials are the ones that have already, we have a ladder system I'd have to explain to truly explain it, but the people that we call our warlords, they've made it to the pinnacle, they've basically won the championship, so to speak, of our game. They are the fighters. If those guys have reached that point, since you can only win that once, they usually are the ones that try to officiate the most because they're the most familiar with what it looks like to cheat, what a shot looks like, how shot placement works. Then there's people like me that I do my best. I use my eyes and my ears. I try to use the other reevers to help determine what happened. And when we don't make a call, to be honest, in our game, there's a lot of courtesy. So if there's a confusion in a fight and they don't exactly know what happened, we are okay with usually backing up and resetting and they'll replay the round.
I just assumed, ignorantly so, that it was an honor system sort of thing.
Kind of. So there's also a difference in different types of Amtgard games. We have tournament style fighting like what I was just describing. It's a one-on-one. Weapons are predetermined. There are no spells in tournaments usually. Most tournaments are literally just combat. It's what you can do with you.
If I could just stop you for 1 second. So Amtgard has spells.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's put a pin in that, and then I'll come back to it. All right, so magic's on hold. So a tournament usually does not allow for the druids and the sorcerers.
No,
and the
tournament, no one's playing a class.
Gotcha.
In a tournament, no one. It is literally just the weapons you're using, and we play with our contact rules. You lose 2 limbs. If you take a hit that has 2 of the 3 descriptors, which I think has to make an audible pop noise when you get hit. It has to deflect or stop. So if you stab and it kind of rubs. It has to hit a certain way where it's deflected to a different direction.
It's a glancing blow versus an actual proper impact.
Yeah, a lot of the frustration that comes from some of the other games when they come to play Amtgard is they're used to playing games like Dagthir where there's a required amount of pressure in order for, like, somebody can get hit but they feel like it really was a glancing blow and they can call light. And those guys keep fighting. That's how they play. In Amtgard, if I lightly touch you, your arm's gone. It doesn't matter the amount of pressure I apply. Any touch counts. So our weapons are also made to be as fast as possible. A lot of people make them as light as possible.
I've seen that too, because when I was working at the shop years ago, we would sell boffer weapons, but they were really, really heavy, thickly padded, canvas-wrapped things, and that does not lend itself. It's got a lot of drag and weight.
Those weapons would never get used on our field. People will have them because they look cool. It's easier to make something look cool that has a lot of weight to it because you can add all the foam and the things you got to cut and mold to make those things look cool and still make them field legal. Versus our weapons essentially look like sticks that are wrapped in pantyhose or cloth covers that we will custom make. And that's just because we've discovered that foam contacting people's skin does not feel the greatest and it can leave things. If you put just a simple cloth cover over it, it does not hurt to get hit with one of our weapons really, unless somebody really puts force behind it. And our rules actually indicate that you're not supposed to do that. We don't do what we call baseball swinging. You're swinging with precision and intent, not strength.
Is there any kind of rivalry between the different sets of LARP-style combat boffer rules?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Our system is better because X. All right, well, let's get into that dirt.
Well, so that's... I wouldn't say that there's like a rivalry, but there's absolutely difference between the systems and everybody's got their favorite.
Right. We're better fighters because we're faster and more precise, or we're better fighters because you can't just lay a finger on me and say my fucking arm is gone. You have to make me feel it.
Yeah. So in truth, that also depends on the style of combat, because while I say that we have fighters that win cross tournaments, and that's true, they're going to games like Dagthir and, I forget what the other one was that came off of it. Those games are very similar to ours. In fact, our game came from that game. It was literally someone wanted to add magic, or there was like a dispute in some leadership. I don't know. But our game was spawned off of that game. And so yeah, there's a little bit of a like, which one of the fighters from the top of each of the ladders is gonna win, and that's the things we win. When you bring in all of the LARPs, I think one of the largest ones that a lot of people know, and I don't know if they even would like being called a LARP, would be the SCA, the Society of, and those guys fight.
Yeah, creative anachronisms.
And I would never play that game just because they're historically accurate with a lot of their stuff. Their kits are a lot more, like, we don't.
Yeah, they're grognards, right? They're the color of the seam or on the corner of your lapel is incorrect sort of folk. Yeah.
Well, so I don't know for a fact because I haven't gone myself, but yeah, that's what I've heard is they're a little more stricter on their like garb requirements and they use, from what I understand, they use like rattan. They use the steel weapons when they fight a lot.
Yeah, I used to work with a young woman grew up in that culture, and she's a big part of it, and it's pretty remarkable, some of the weapons and armor and things they put together.
Like somebody that's used to rattan fighting though, heavy weapon, heavy armor where the blows count, is not going to come over to our game where it's literally a speed stick fight and be very skilled, whereas the speed stick fighter is still learning those techniques, and that we don't immediately transition in or grade it or anything. It's just our game is I guess it's harder for them to adapt to our style versus us kind of taking the little skill we have to adapt to something like theirs. In like real fighting, we have people come out that are like, I was a fencer for years, and they get stomped because fencing, the skills in that really don't translate well to foam.
I am not in any way, shape, or form a fighter, but I've watched plenty of boffer fighting, and I have seen fencing on the strip. Just the body movement is different, right?
Yeah, but these guys will come out, and it's cool to have them come out and show us some of the cool stuff they know too, because I mean, we love trading experience, knowledge, that type of thing. That's part of the community building. But when they come out, they're like, I'm going to beat everybody on this field, and then they go against one of our guys that's one of those warlords or sword knights, and they don't even see how that guy moved to hit them, and they're just like, I think he cheated, and you're just like, well, it's more you're just in a game you don't understand yet. And yeah, it's been fun going through it, that's for sure.
We've got a pretty firm idea of combat. So you don't have hit points. You just have up or down, functional, non-functional limb.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction. Now, you guys have armor.
Yep, and armor is played in battle games. That's where you start coming out of tournaments. Tournaments are very specific for fighting skill. When you get to battle games, that's where our game is more appealing to the larger crowd. That's why we actually have players who aren't somebody like me or you that maybe is not the most athletic. We weren't the kids in gym class that got picked first. you can still participate in that and be meaningful and enjoy it. And that's where the magic system and the armor system and that come into play. A guy who is really good with a sword can still come into a camp of 6 guys that have really good skills and kick all their asses. But the guys that are able to use spells to kill someone no longer have to have the physical and athletic ability.
Right, because they can stand back and throw a small bean bag or something, and then do they declare what spell they're casting, or how does that work?
Coloration is part of it. The color of the spell balls is what we call them. Spell balls can be made of many materials. We have some the crafting requirements are in our rule book. You get some varied designs. You get the guys that make them look like fireballs with the red cloth, and then they'll put like streamers on them. But then you get the guys that just kind of wrap things up in old socks and dye them. Coloration's part of the rule book. Kind of helps us determine the spells. There are verbal components to some of them where they have to yell and declare. But a lot of it you can get just off of the coloration of things. And we don't use too many. There's red, yellow, and white for our strips. So enchantments exist in the game too. I believe I hate that I don't know this. A red is for offensive type enchantments.
Okay.
Like that type of thing.
Let me come in here and throw you a life preserver. Something about management that people have to understand. The reason that your manager is shitty because your manager is better than you at your job, but they're not good at managing people. Someone does not have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of your skill set and what you do in your job to be a good manager or to be a good administrator. So you shouldn't feel bad at all. I should educate myself. And honestly, if the listener's interested, they can go look this shit up. The rules are free online at Amtgard.com. Help yourself. So you don't feel bad at all. You're a guest in my home.
Oh, no, I don't.
I'm kidding.
I frequently reference the rule book. To be fair, I've only been in the game about 6.5 years now. The average player in our game
So wait a minute. You're playing D&D at 8, but you don't really get into this until your late 20s?
So my story on that one's a little interesting. When I was back doing the Living Greyhawk thing, I met a guy named Charlie Dagore, Tanith as he's known in our game. I met him playing D&D and he explained to me that Amtgard was kind of like D&D in real life. Now that was back in version 6 of the rules, and our rules did...
You guys are on 8 now, right?
Yeah, and honestly, we're getting closer to 9 coming out. And to be honest, as it's progressed, it's gotten away from the LARPy and more into the sporty. So version 6 of the rules was a little closer to like a Dungeons and Dragons style game. We had a lot of like spells that did goofy stuff. These days, the spell lists are very limited.
Version 6 was much more LARPy.
Yeah.
And the game, in your experience, has evolved. So now you're on version 8, almost version 9, and it's become less of a LARP and more sport or activity oriented, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's streamlined is what they would have called the designs that they did. They took out a lot of the confusing spells that were, and admittedly, very confusing to learn, and to learn the interaction of magic was kind of a put off for some people that would first come to the game, because someone would kill you with a combination of spells you didn't understand as a first day newbie, and that can be frustrating. They reduced it significantly where they could identify things with the colors like I had described earlier. From what I understand, so I only played in the game that time, maybe 5 times I went out, and then I got really involved with some other stuff in school that basically took my interest away from it. But I went out 5 times, and in those times, I went to one of their bigger events that, it's not big event. It was called the Mini Knoblander. They used to have these things called Knoblanders, which were, it was a specific type of event that a guy who ran the game, made. And he ran a smaller version of it a couple of times because it was so popular. And I actually managed to make it to one of those when I was younger. And it's what trapped me. It was a 3-day style event where you get there on Friday and you got into play as you got there. You could die overnight. You could die at any point. You had a limited number of lives and resources. And there were monsters that came out that they had in full costume. They tried to do a dragon in a really cool way. It was a really, really neat event. And the only reason I didn't go out is when I first went to these things, I couldn't drive. So like after the buddy I had kind of lost interest in it because he didn't understand the spell system, I no longer had a ride, and so I kind of stopped going. Fast forward to me being about, I guess I was 26 when I met Ben. I got onto Facebook one day and wild hair up my ass typed in the word Amtgard to go find out if this game still existed. And lo and behold, there's groups that still are around. And I joined one of these Facebook groups to basically say, hey, are any of these people I used to know that play this game still? And as soon as I joined one of these groups, this guy that lived 3 blocks away from me, creepily enough, messages me, hey, I see we live really close together. Mind you, I've never said a word to this person. I see you live really close to me and I'm heading out to that event this weekend. How would you feel about us carpooling? My name's Ben. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. This could be a great ending to my story. And I took off with this guy, Ben. Ben is now my knight. So in our game, we have a structure of mentoring where, so it's done, of course, in the whole style of feudal things.
Sure. So I was reading that knights can have a squire.
Squires,
right.
and they can also have pages, the step below squire. And we also do man-at-arms. Different belt lines look at it differently. There's no like standard way to do it. The only standard thing in the game is knights. Knights are considered the pinnacle of a ladder. Our game has an award system for doing specific things. It's split into arts and sciences, service award, leadership, and fighting. And based on which ladder you go up is which type of knight you become. We do have knights that are multiple belts. The average duration to get one of those knighthoods is between 9 and 10 years on most people. So those are the players that have been around.
That's a tremendous commitment.
It really is. Most of the people that are in our game are in it for life. They really, like, the game hasn't been around long enough to say in it for life. I mean, I think Amtgard showed up in like the late 80s. So I mean, some of the guys that started it are still around. They don't play the game anymore, but they're still around.
But you were telling me today, you have people that have been playing for, almost 2 decades.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The guy I mentioned earlier, Charlie Tanith, he's been playing for at least that long. So the other thing that a lot of us talk about, I have to throw it in, the health benefits of what we do. We're nerds, and a lot of us don't really like going out and doing sports. I can tell you when I started this game, I lost weight. I can tell you I have friends that got into exercising, not because they enjoyed exercise. They wanted to beat the other guy in the field, and they were fucking sick of not catching him. So they started working out to catch up to him. Like, this game is a lot to a lot of people.
Let me take a step back to the rules, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
You've got spells. Spells are color-coded, little spell balls we're throwing.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm assuming that in these mass battles where we've got magic and other rules, you have teams of Reeves kind of milling about the field, or
so
because when you're adding, I'm stabbing you with this. I've got a speed stick. I'm hitting you, and then we agree you're hit. We don't agree you're hit. But now I'm throwing a different colored sock thing at you and saying that you've been hit by a thing of armor, and you have ancient ancestral armor, and my spell removes 3 points, but your armor actually
has 6.
It has 6 points, and because it's ancestral,
it only takes 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fucking nightmare.
Again, reaving is not like an easy thing. The guys that volunteer for it, and it's all volunteer. We don't like have appointed people that do this. It's literally, hey, we're doing this event. Who wants to be the referees this time? And that's like where you get those service awards, or for people that step up to do these things. Mm-hmm. Those volunteers do the best they can. We're working on a half honor, half referee based system. And I mean, most of our players are pretty courteous to one another. When it comes to something being confusing, people will stop and explain it to one another. The veteran fighters though, when they get into it, you don't need a reeve, because they'll sit there and discuss it for 10 minutes to make sure that they're on the same page. And a lot of the time they'll walk away being like, one of them might not feel the greatest about it, but they usually come to a consensus on what happened.
So you've got armor, you've got spells, you're fighting with weapons, you've got
bows.
Bows. So we're like, how do the bows work? That sounds dangerous.
Absolutely. Most dangerous weapon in the game, I would argue, between bows and pole arms, because pole arms can be a little unwieldy.
Oh, sure, yeah. Somebody's gonna lose an eye.
I don't know if anyone has lost an eye, but we had a guy named Dave get his eye socket broken, I think is what happened.
Jesus Christ.
Arrows, the way that we work on those is so a lot of people are familiar with that archery tag. There's a game that got kind of spread out that was like a substitute for paintball that kind of got widespread recently. There's a lawsuit going on actually between that guy and some people in our various games because he kind of stole the design for his arrows from people in our games. Not Amtgard specifically. I can't remember which LARP it was that's in that, but
I hope they had some sort of, trademark or legal protection on that, because if not, they're
that
screwed.
Guy. Well, honestly, if that guy's idea was to take it and turn it into tag, he took somebody else's idea and turned it into something different to me. That's where innovation comes from. I don't know why we try to stifle that, but that's something different anyway. Archer tech in our game, you're limited to a bow weight bow that only has so much draw. There's rules about how far you can draw the bow. If somebody's within a certain amount of length, you're not supposed to full draw the bow. And we are pretty strict about those rules because that is one of the most dangerous implements in the game. Arrows have to be checked every game. We make sure that there's nothing wrong with the heads. The heads are specifically designed with these cushions. There's a blunt thing behind layers and layers of, like, the odds of you getting hit by anything actually hard, pretty low on well-constructed arrows. And we're pretty diligent about keeping up.
How thick is the waiver to play this game?
2 pages.
Seriously? That's it?
So yes, because in 2 pages we're able to cover most of the things that could happen on the field by using very generalized terms. I wasn't behind the waiver. Our waiver was drawn up based, I think, on the Boy Scouts waiver.
I gotcha. I mean, but it's necessary, right?
Oh yeah, you have to sign a waiver to play the game. We have our own insurance to make sure nobody really gets hurt. And to be honest, I've been in the game about 6.5 years. I've seen 2 injuries that were bad enough that could warrant need. One of them was a girl was on a field and got clocked in the head with a guy who was wearing a metal gauntlet, and he overhand hit her in the head. So she had a mild concussion, and that really sucked. That was bad. But I mean, field stops, play stops, everyone suddenly clears out. The people who are medically trained, because we have nurses and stuff in our community, the people who are medically trained are immediately by their side. 911's called. We know what we're supposed to do in those situations. They don't come up that often. Honestly, hers is the only one that comes to mind. I know we had another serious injury, but I don't believe it was game caused. I think someone was kind of goofing off and they half jumped off this bridge at one of our sites and they snapped their ankle. But it wasn't even during like a combat. It was literally like somebody on the campsite was goofing off or might have been drunk or something and they had a mistake.
How much fucking happens at these things?
Well,
I mean, because this whole community and subsect of people, this is just ripe for backstabbing and infidelity and so and so. I mean, the politics and just the bullshit of it. The soap opera drama potential is very, very high.
It happens. To be honest, there is some stuff that goes on at larger events at night with adults that is their own business.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It seems to me like
I'm not uncomfortable talking about it.
Like
it's an adult community full of adults, so they can do what they want.
Going to debate camp or going to band camp or something like that. You have these people who, I don't know, to me it sounds like a bunch of band and theater kids who also like Dungeons and Dragons, who are going to go out on the weekend and hang out and beat the snot out of each other with sticks and then hang out at night and have some intoxicants and maybe get a little bit loose with our genitals.
It happens. There are certainly people that enjoy their fellow man while they're at events, but it's not a focus of events.
Sure.
Mean, some people absolutely show up to Amtgard to see their friend from across the country, right. And they had a fling at one time, and whatever they do, they're consenting adults. We know what happens. That's not why people were there, though.
Right. Sure. It's just like going to a con.
Absolutely.
The reason you go to the con is the event, but there's a ton of other peripherals.
Yeah. And people drink, we socialize. Once the games are done, you're still there overnight. Some of our events, we do overnight activities. There's events where we do like the 24-hour type fighting things, but a lot of our events, everything kind of stops at like 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock. People have had dinner. People start drinking. They hang out around campfires. They tell stories. We do politics because, of course, it is a popularity contest when it comes to who's running the kingdom, who's in charge of the offices. Because we come down to people run. There's an election process. Someone's elected. They present their plans, and then you get in office and you do your best to try to do those plans.
What if I want to spectate? What if I want to come to an event as a journalist and just write an article about my experience that weekend? Like, I want to go and meet these people because I love camping. I love hiking. I love being in the outdoors. I want to move to the Pacific Northwest because I love I love that lifestyle. I want to come to these events and meet these people because it sounds really fucking cool.
Regular Amtgard, the week to week, we meet on Sundays at our local park and fight with our friends. The parks in places like St. Louis, Columbia, the bigger cities, they average a 30 to 40 person attendance. The smaller parks, some of them only have 6 and 7 people that meet on a weekly basis in their local park. But then we have these big events, the kingdom events. Those happen every 6 months. We have 2 of them that the kingdom has. Sometimes there's additional ones that people individually throw, or we have some big, like, what we call inter-kingdom events. So like Tal Dagore is Missouri, Illinois. Rising Winds is probably one of the largest geographical kingdoms, I want to say, and they're our neighbor. They're like Ohio, Indiana, they're real big. And then there's Polaris, which is north of us, and I think they have a little bit in Canada. They're gonna probably tell me I'm wrong on that. But they're a little bit north. They're kind of northern Illinois, very, very edge of northeastern Illinois, and then a lot of their kingdom heads that way. we put on an event between the three of our kingdoms called Keep on the Borderlands. It's one of the largest events in Amtgard. It's usually, so the numbers have gone down over the years because we've had some hiccups. We outgrew the original site we were on. We could no longer really be there comfortably anymore. So they changed the site. And when that happened, a few people were kind of hesitant to come because they didn't know if the amenities at the new site.
Yeah, people hate change.
Yeah, well, that particular site they moved to was awesome. But anyway, it's probably one of our biggest events. I think the largest I've ever seen it. It was very close to 1,000 people. They built these two, there's a really good metal guy in our group. His name's Al. He built the frames for these two awesome castle facade wall things that you can get up on and shoot archers off of, that have these doors that you can bang in, and they built legitimate battering rams that they take to these doors. And we do a castle siege game where these teams of like 50 split off to do a assault on these things.
But that doesn't answer my, do you allow camp followers? Are there
if you wanted to show up,
yeah, I just want to fucking spectate.
So there are people that also come to our game that don't participate in any of this. They literally help in ways of like trash and cooking and cleaning. And then there's people like you, like we've legitimately had people that just showed up that wanted to observe. We have no problem with that. There's a gate fee, but that's to cover like the cost of, they provide food a lot of the time, a couple of meals.
I know the king, man. I'll get a press pass. It's cool.
But in terms of like how the game works, they'd welcome somebody just to come observe. Absolutely.
I would love that. I would happily pay the gate fee because I'm sure that money goes to pay for the facility for the venue for that weekend and God knows what else.
Food, as well as we have an insurance bill. I mean, when you think about it, it's a year long.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Like at the events.
So I don't. We can be vocal about it. You asked me if marijuana's okay at our events.
Okay. May I smoke marijuana at the event?
So the stance officially for our club is that you cannot break laws while you are under like the club does not want you to break laws at the event. Marijuana is still kind of in a gray area because it's legal in states, but it's illegal in Fed, and you're not allowed to smoke in state parks, which is where a lot of our events take place.
Right.
So truthfully, no, it's not really an Amtgard thing. I mean, there's groups of us that smoke, I'm sure, but we respect the ones that, you know, they don't want to be held accountable for it. They don't want to get in trouble. So we're not on the site. We're not doing things in areas where it could be
whoever's doing it is off on their own, not affiliated with the event. They just happen to be somebody who enjoys that, who also enjoys this other thing that might be illegal.
I think the general rule is that as long as everybody's not aware you're doing it, you're not bringing attention to it, and you go off and you're discreet. Generally, we've it's one of those gray areas.
Sure.
If you're being an asshole about it, if you're one of those guys that decides I'm going to smoke 5 feet from where everybody's hanging out that doesn't smoke.
Right.
No, they're going to do something about it because you're being a jerk.
Yeah, it's outlaw justice. You just don't be an asshole.
Yeah. And again, the game's stance on everything legal is if you are breaking the law, you should not be doing that at our game. So in truth right now, with it being federally illegal, when somebody asks me my stance on marijuana at an Amtgard event, I tell them, please don't bring it.
Yeah, it's illegal.
It's illegal.
You said something earlier, so to me, probably the most intriguing facet that you brought up earlier was the storytelling, the writing aspect. You have essentially stripped down versions of the game where it's just combat, mano a mano, skill to skill. You have smaller adventures that, you're adding magic. You've got big events where you've got hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, overnight events, monsters, things like that. But there's a narrative that ties it all together. And you said earlier that was the thing that really you enjoy about the game is structuring stories.
So here's where we get into what Adam does for Amtgard that's a little different.
Yeah.
Amtgard itself does not have a structure like you're talking. There isn't a story continuing on in our kingdom right now. There isn't a narrative. Every monarch comes along and has their theme or their story or there's something they want to tell, and some of them do it to the extent of I'm just running Amtgard where we're going to do our events and have a good time, and they don't really tell a narrative. There isn't really a story. We have ones that are like, well, I'm going to run a reign that's nautical themed, and we're going to do boat combat, and the battle games are going to be themed in boat stuff, and everybody does something different. My goal, this will be my second time as the monarch. The first time I ran as the monarch, I did something that I called the Lord. Well, I think it was the Ladies' War was the second one. The Lord's War, actually, a buddy of mine was the monarch, and I ran as his champion, which is another officer position of ours. But what we did is almost like an Amtgard Risk style game. I had 4 players of our community that were kind of the leaders, and I had a board, and I made up all of my own rules on how it worked, and they acted as if though generals and kings and made videos towards each other and encouraged people to pick a side and fight for your side at your park, and they earned points based on what people did at their parks, and we came up with a winner at the end. The first one was 4 guys, the second one was 3 girls is how I tried to do it, and that was a lot of fun. And with that, I kind of took, okay, our kingdom does kind of like having a narrative. They kind of do like having a story. Now, a lot of them don't like doing the role play thing where they walk up and have to act things, but having a little bit of a background as to why they're fighting, a lot of them are okay with that. And the ones that are more into the story, they dive a little deeper. And the ones that aren't, we're cool with them just showing up to fight. The community works with that.
Do you guys have scripted adventures with monsters? Like, hey, on this event this weekend, there's a group of trolls, a family of trolls that has been conscripted by this goblin sorcerer and all of her goblin minions, and they're coming to attack the camp, and we need to, fight them, or we have to go find the MacGuffin so we can defeat this evil goblin sorceress. Do you do stuff like that?
Occasionally. Again, we have that weekly park meeting where people meet with their local group. Their local group is run by a monarch at that level. Like, they also have a leader of their park that has kind of the direction of that park. The kingdom then has a leader that helps basically helps the park leaders when they need help, and then the kingdom leader is the one that's responsible for handling those big events and the big tournaments and that. Like setting things up, making sure we have locations. Again, it's a lot of administration work more than anything. It sounds cool. I'm the king. Really what it is I'm doing all the work like a dummy.
Yeah, no, it's like working at a game store. People think that you have, you work at the comic and game store. People think that you have the life of Riley and you're gaming and reading comic books all the time. And in fact, you read fewer comics and game less. That's just the way it works. So, unlike the corporate world where the higher you climb, the more money you make and the less you actually fucking do. This sounds like a true gaming hobby. The higher you climb, the more work you do and the less fun and recognition you get.
I wouldn't say less recognition, nor fun. So everybody's got their niche. Everybody's got their things they like to do. You've got your guys that really like to fight. They're competitive. You got your people that, we have people that they love to cook. Their whole thing is they love to cook for large groups. So they volunteer to cook at some of these things. We've got our people that like arts and sciences, which is a whole division of our game. The folks that have learned crafts like blacksmithing, metalworking, knitting, sewing, basket making, painting, the outfits and stuff we make. So obviously we have tailoring and dressmaking and all that too. And they have these competitions for those folks too, where they present some of the stuff that they've made, and we do classes where people teach these things to each other. So there's a recognition for that. People teaching those classes, people that make cool things get recognition.
Wow.
This all works on a ladder system, whereas you build up these awards, you build your way to the 10th. So, arts and sciences, we have what's called dragons. They're for the stuff I just described, music, everything that isn't clothes. Clothes is garb. And then stuff that you would consider functional items, swords, we use owls. So there's 3 different award ladders. As you progress through that, if you get to the top of any of them, the 10th award, you get the chance of your masterhood. You're considered a master at that point of your craft. You're a master craftsman, you're a master fighter, you're a master whatever. The master fighters we call warlords. The master dragons are masterhoods of their craft. Master crowns is a new one. That's the leadership one. It used to be done on this point system. We've changed it now so it matches the rest of the award ladders where you go up 10. And then there's Master Flame, which is the service folks. They progressively get harder. Somebody who is getting their first Order of the Rose, which is the service award for doing, helping, might get it for picking up trash after an event and helping kind of get the trash out. Whereas the guy that got his 10th Order of the Rose ran the event, made sure everything was handled, took care of the expense report. The guy that did a lot and made sure this happened, he's the guy getting the 10th Order of the Rose. He's considered a master. That's kind of like our scale. Somebody that just started making garb will get, a first or second order of the garb, whereas the girl that's spending 200 hours on the hand-sewn Victorian-style gown is going to get a master garber and that recognition.
All of this sounds really fun. It sounds like a great community. How does somebody get into it? If someone heard this episode and they were like, I really want to give that a shot, how do they start? Cause I can't go to the store and buy the book off the shelf.
Oh no.
And then hopefully, my buddies at school will play with me. How do I get into this?
So it's definitely gonna be location based. You're gonna have to find your local park. Our website, amtgard.com, I think has some information. The Amp Wiki is another good resource. Facebook is what I did. I just literally Facebooked the name Amtgard. And you can find our pages and any of our boards. If you go on it and go, I live in such and such state in this area, someone's going to tell you where to go. Someone's going to tell you where your local park is. To be honest, it's one of the difficulties of the community, and it's one we're kind of looking at now, and a lot of us that are kind of like wanting to recruit, it's one of the challenges is how do you get somebody to break into a community like this where there's so much depth and not be overwhelmed right off the bat and still have interest in it? And how do you grow that without scaring them off? Because there is a lot to our game, and it looks very daunting to someone that's new.
You need a structure, right, for introduction. You need a thing that says, okay, overall, here's sort of our mission statement. Here's a summary of what you do. And then literally here's an org chart of what do you want to do? Let's work backwards. Like, so you want to be a fighter. Well, here's how you learn to fight, and here are the fighting rules and all that. If you just Amtgard.com, Facebook, etc. It's really the easiest ways to sign up. Are there monthly dues or things that people pay?
So the way that our government system works, as I said, our elected officials are elected by its members. Every 6 months, you pay a due if you choose to vote. So we have citizen players and we have regular players. You're a citizen player if you have to have an attendance of at least I think it's either 8 sign-ins in 6 months or 6 sign-ins in 8 months. I can't quite remember. But you have to have so many sign-ins.
Oh, that's somebody else's job. You're the goddamn king. That's somebody else's job.
Well, yeah, the name of the guy that handles that is the prime minister that tracks attendance things. But you have to meet certain requirements, and then it's a $6 due every 6 months to vote. You don't have to do that to play. You can play without ever paying dues. You can play Amtgard pretty much entirely for free. The cost breaking in, probably your first set of gear will cost you a little bit. I'd say you could spend less than $50 and get a really decent set of gear. If you were willing to go super cheap and deal with being super cheap, you could probably do $125.
What does that constitute?
I would say you would want to talk to somebody about a very basic tunic so that you're not just wearing your t-shirt and stuff out to play. A sword that's decently made. If you want to add to that kit, you could get your first shield, which, I mean, they use snow sleds. Those plastic circular snow sleds are a good base for it. I use plank foam. The shield I actually use is plank foam that's been cut into the shape, and then I put a cloth cover over the top of it so that it's got some look to it. Those first bits of gear. The other thing is the first few times you come out to try the game, we have a ton of loaner gear. All of us have extra stuff. And when we have a newbie, our first thing is, okay, well, let's show them the ropes. We'll give them a bit of equipment, and we'll get them started fighting. Because truthfully, most people's first interest in our game is not in the community and in the hobbies, arts and sciences and stuff. Most people's first introduction to the game is, I want to go out there and fight and do whatever those nerds are doing over in that field. That's really what draws our people
they
in.
grab the rule book, they turn right to the combat chapter, and that's the thing that drew them. Yeah,
I don't know that the rule book is usually.
No, I mean I was just making a joke, calling back to my earlier bit.
But it's true. That's really what brings people to the game, because the primary focus of the game is the combat. I mean, at the end of the day, the battle games and the combat, that's Amtgard. The community is something that spawned from it. That's this whole own unique beast that I never expected to get into in something like this. I thought I was getting into a casual sporting thing that was going to keep me healthy. And the next thing I know, I have a whole new set of lifelong friends that I'm learning all these different crafts that I can tell you I never would have gotten to sewing. You would have never seen me at a sewing machine. Now I'm interested in learning how to make all these weird patterns because it's cool to make this stuff.
The camping, the crafting, the community, that's the stuff that I find, frankly, most intriguing. I'm not a young man anymore. I just don't have it in me to go out there and, get my ass kicked by a 16-year-old. I just don't. I've got just enough ego and pride left that I can't do that.
The hook isn't the same for everybody, but I would say generally that first hook we get people with is that they either saw someone playing or they saw a video or something where they got interested enough to go find out what we are.
If somebody wants to contact, if somebody hears this and they're like, I'm going to reach out to this king guy, this Adam Freund, and I want to learn about Amtgard. If somebody wants to find you, are you cool with that? You want to give them you want to throw that out there or no?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm not too worried about people reaching out to me. Usually most people contact me via Facebook. I'm not always the one that's in charge. It just so happens to be that right now I'm the one that would be best to reach. In the future, if you wanted to reach out to the person that understood or that was in charge, you'd have to just email we have a Kingdom mailbox that's just tdmonarchy@gmail.com, and that passes along with whoever's in office.
All right, so if I've got questions or whatever, it was tdmonarchy@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, Adam Freund, it has been really, really delightful. You have opened my eyes to a world that I definitely want to dig more into, because if most of the people are like you and they just want to hang out and have a good time and sleep on the dirt overnight and talk about fucking dragons.
I don't sleep on the dirt, but yes.
Oh, so you have a fancy rig?
Well, at this point, so I haven't taken it out yet because we just purchased it, but me and the girlfriend just purchased a 28-foot long camper. No, we camp in class, sir.
Wow. Oh no, man, I would be like a plebe. I would have my, my sponge bedroll and my sleeping bag, and
my back would not allow me to sleep on no sponge bedroll.
Yeah, now I would have a 6-person tent for myself.
That's normal. That's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when they tell you it's a 2-person tent, they're lying.
No, it's a half-person tent.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's not even tall enough for most of us. No, I mean, there's people that are in tents. There's people that have their campers. I'd honestly say that most people come in tents. Some of our sites have bunkhouses. A lot of the time what we'll do is we'll auction those off to make a little bit more money for the event so that it can go back into the coffers, because you got all those expenses that come up. And truthfully, it's not a game to make money. A lot of our events are $25-$30 for the whole weekend, and that's $30 for activities on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, usually 2 to 3 meals, all of that for like $25-$30.
Wait, now you said food earlier. I was a bit confused, but I let it go. I just assumed that people brought their own chow.
Most events these days that are larger events, we offer at least dinner. Some events offer full catering. They do breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. But some events, like the ones that I tend to run lately, or at least my goal is to lean more towards just doing dinners. It takes a lot of pressure off the staff. Remember, we're all volunteer. There's nobody getting paid to do anything, including the people that are in there cooking your food and cleaning the kitchen. So if I only have to make them do that once a day as opposed to making them do that 3 times a day, I want to lean towards something like that.
Adam, thank you so much for your time. I definitely, when the pandemic is in a manageable position and you guys are doing events again, I'm super serious. I would love to come out and just hang out and meet some of these people, because it sounds like a very fun, just wholesome, good time with people that I have a lot in common with.
Yeah, you're gonna wind up that a lot of your customers or former customers play this game with me.
Well, thanks, Adam.
Absolutely.
Why We Game is a production of the Influence Foundation. All rights reserved. Audio editing by Brodor. Music by Owen Godwin.